That morning, no one expected a single act of defiance to change military history. What began as routine training became a moment every soldier on base would remember, and one that would test the difference between following orders and doing what's right. The sun hung low over Fort Harlan, casting long shadows across the dusty parade ground. Staff Sergeant Elena Vasquez stood at attention, her boots planted firmly in the packed earth, the faint scent of creosote from the nearby scrub brushing against her uniform. At her side, Rex, her Belgian Malinois, sat rigid, his ears perked forward, black eyes scanning the horizon with the precision of a well-oiled rifle. The air hummed with the low murmur of rotors from the distant helipad, and the sharp crack of commands echoed from the drill instructors barking orders to the assembled platoon. "Platoon, attention!" The voice belonged to Captain Harlan Reed, the base's operations officer, a man whose frame filled out his fatigues with the authority of 20 years in special forces. His gaze swept the ranks like a searchlight, lingering on Eleanor and Rex. She felt the weight of it, the subtle scrutiny that had grown since she'd transferred in 6 months prior. Rex shifted slightly, his harness creaking, but Elena's hand rested steady on his flank, a silent reassurance born of countless hours in the field. The morning's exercise was standard, a simulated perimeter sweep testing the integration of K9 units with infantry patrols. Elena had run these drills 100 times, from the arid stretches of her last posting in the Middle East to the cooler winds here in the American Southwest. Rex was her partner, certified in detection and apprehension, his nose attuned to explosives, narcotics, and the subtle cues of human deception that even the sharpest operator might miss. Their bond was forged in silence, in the rhythm of heel commands, and the trust that came from shared risks. No words needed, just the quiet pulse of loyalty. "Handler Vasquez!" Captain Reed called out, his tone clipped and formal. "Your unit will lead the sweep. Keep it tight. No deviations." He paused, his eyes narrowing on Rex. "And control that animal. Last week's false alert cost us an hour." Elena saluted crisply, her voice even. "Yes, sir. Rex is ready." Internally, she bristled at the word animal, but she held her expression neutral as protocol demanded. Rex wasn't just a dog, he was a soldier in his own right, with a service record that included sniffing out an IED cache during a joint op in Syria. But to Reed, who favored tech over instinct, K9 handlers were a relic. And Rex's occasional hesitations, pauses that Elena knew signaled deeper instincts, were liabilities. The platoon moved out in formation, boots thudding in unison against the gravel path that wound toward the mock village setup on the base's edge. Radio chatter crackled softly in Elena's earpiece. "Alpha Team, maintain visual. Tango markers at grid 2-5. The air grew warmer as they advanced, the desert heat rising in waves that distorted the chain-link fences marking the perimeter. Rex trotted at her left, leash loose but taut, his nostrils flaring with each step, cataloguing scents the humans around them ignored. They reached the first checkpoint, a cluster of prefab buildings simulating barracks. Private Lawson, a wiry scout from the platoon, took point, sweeping the entrance with his carbine. "Clear," he reported, voice steady over the comms. Elena released Rex with a soft command. "Such!" And he bounded forward, weaving through the shadows, his paws silent on the concrete. She watched his body language, tail low, head down, the subtle hitch in his gait that meant he was processing something layered, complex. It happened without warning. Rex halted abruptly at the base roster board, mounted on the outer wall. A simple laminated sheet listing personnel assignments, updated weekly for security rotations. He growled low, a rumble that vibrated through Elena's boots, his hackles rising as he pawed at the ground. The platoon froze, weapons half raised, eyes darting to the handler. "Easy, Rex," Eleanor murmured, kneeling beside him. Her gloved hand traced his shoulders, feeling the tension coiled there. He wasn't alerting to a threat in the traditional sense. No explosives, no contraband. But his focus was locked on the roster, specifically a name halfway down. Corporal Elias Grant, a logistics specialist transferred in last month. Rex's nose pressed close to the paper, inhaling deeply. Then he barked once, sharp and insistent. Captain Reed strode up, his face hardening. "Vasquez, leash him. Now, this is not the time for games." "Sir, he's indicating," Elena replied, keeping her tone professional, though her pulse quickened. Rex had flagged anomalies before, stolen gear, hidden contraband, but a roster. It didn't make sense on the surface. Still, she trusted his Reed. In the field, hesitation could mean lives. Reed's jaw tightened. Indicating what? A piece of paper. "Your dog's unstable, Sergeant. I've reviewed the logs. 3 false positives in the last quarter. Stand him down, or I'll have him pulled from duty." The words landed like a reprimand in formation, drawing murmurs from the platoon. Elena felt the eyes on her, the weight of the chain of command pressing down. Obey. And Rex's credibility, and hers, took another hit. Defy even subtly, and it could flag her file. She glanced at Rex, his eyes meeting hers with that unwavering calm, the bond pulling taut. "With respect, sir," she said evenly, "Rex doesn't false alert. He's trained to detect inconsistencies. Let me run a secondary check." Reed's stare bored into her, the desert wind whipping at the edges of the roster sheet. For a moment, the only sound was the distant thump of a helicopter warming up, and Rex's steady breathing. 2 minutes, Reed conceded, though his voice carried the edge of a warning. "Make it count, and if it's nothing, we're filing a report." Eleanor nodded, signaling Rex to hold as she pulled her tablet from her vest, syncing it to the base's secure database. The platoon waited in disciplined silence, the morning's routine fracturing under the unspoken tension. She knew this could be routine bureaucracy, a mismatched entry, a clerical error. But Rex's alert lingered in her mind, a whisper of something deeper, a threat disguised in plain sight amid the order of ranks and rosters. As the data loaded, the screen flickering in the sunlight, Elena felt the first ripple of doubt about the man whose name Rex had zeroed in on. Corporal Grant had kept to himself since arriving, his file clean but sparse. Logistics, yes, but what if the dog's nose had caught a scent trail from the paper itself, a trace of forgery or infiltration? The base had seen its share of security breaches, subtle ones that started with a single overlooked detail. Rex whined softly, pressing closer to her leg, his loyalty a quiet anchor in the rising scrutiny. Eleanor's fingers hovered over the keys, the moral line sharpening. Follow the commander's doubt, or trust the partner who had never steered her wrong. The platoon shifted uneasily, the hum of the base life continuing around them, oblivious to the defiance brewing in that single pivotal moment. Elena's tablet screen stabilized in the glare, the secure database pulling up Corporal Elias Grant's file with a series of soft chimes. The platoon held position, their formation a disciplined semicircle around the roster board, carbines slung low but ready. Captain Reed paced a few steps away, his boots kicking up faint puffs of dust, arms crossed over his chest like a barrier against the interruption. Rex remained at her side, his body language unchanged, alert but composed, his gaze fixed on the laminated sheet as if willing it to yield its secrets. The file loaded, basic biometrics, assignment history, a string of routine evaluations from his previous post at Fort Bragg. Grant, 32, logistics coordinator with a clean record. No infractions, no red flags, transferred in for base supply chain oversight. His photo showing a lean face with close-cropped hair and eyes that stared directly into the camera, unblinking. Elena scrolled deeper, cross-referencing the roster entry. The ink on the paper looked standard, but Rex's nose had caught something, perhaps a chemical trace, an off glow from the laminate, or even a faint human scent lingering from handling. "Sergeant?" Reed's voice cut through, impatient. "Your 2 minutes are burning." "Sir, the file checks out on surface," Elena reported, her tone measured, professional. She kept her eyes on the screen, buying seconds to scan the metadata timestamps. One entry stood out: Grant's transfer approval, logged at 200 hours last month outside standard processing windows. Clerical oversight or deliberate? Rex nudged her knee, a subtle prompt, his wet nose cool against her fatigues. She trusted that instinct. In training, he differentiated between authentic documents and forgeries by scent alone, picking up on adhesive variances or ink compositions humans overlooked. "Surface is all that matters," Reed replied, stepping closer. His shadow fell across the tablet. "Stand down the dog. We're resuming the sweep. That's an order." The platoon murmured faintly, a ripple of unease in the ranks. Private Lawson shifted his weight, glancing at Eleanor with a mix of curiosity and sympathy. She'd earned respect in the short time here, quiet competence. No drama, but challenging a captain in the field was rare air, thin and charged. Elena's hand tightened on Rex's leash, the leather warm from the sun. Obeying meant dismissing the alert, potentially burying a lead if there was one. Ignoring it risked insubordination, a mark on her record that could sideload her career, especially with Reed's growing skepticism toward the K-9 program. "Permission to log the alert first, sir?" she asked, voice steady, despite the knot in her chest. "Protocol requires documentation for any indication, even preliminary." Reed's eyes narrowed, the lines around them deepening in the harsh light. He was a by-the-book officer, his career built on efficiency and chain-of-command purity. But Elena sensed the undercurrent, budget pressures to phase out unreliable assets like Rex in favor of drone sweeps and AI scanners. "Make it quick," he said finally, though his posture screamed reluctance. "And if this turns into another false positive, Vasquez, you're briefing the colonel yourself." She nodded, tapping the log entry into the tablet. "Alert at grid 25, roster anomaly. K9 indication on personnel file. Time stamped, witnessed by the platoon." As she hit submit, the system pinged a subroutine, flagging the unusual transfer hour for admin review. It wasn't much, but it planted the seed, a formal ripple in the base's bureaucratic waters. Rex whined again, low and insistent, pulling toward the roster. Elena allowed a few inches of leash, letting him sniff closer. The dog's focus sharpened on Grant's name, his tail flicking once, a confirmation signal from their shared lexicon. She committed it to memory. Later, off-log, she'd dig deeper if needed. For now, the sweep resumed, the platoon falling back into rhythm with a collective exhale. Boots crunched over gravel as they advanced to the next structure, a simulated supply depot, the air thick with the metallic tang of chain link and distant diesel fumes from idling trucks. By midday, the exercise wrapped under a relentless sun, the mock village cleared without further incident. Debrief in the ops tent was routine, after-action reports, hydration breaks, the faint buzz of fluorescent lights overhead. Elena secured Rex in his kennel area, adjacent to the handler barracks, a shaded enclosure with fresh water and chew toys, scented like training aids. He settled with a sigh, circling once before lying down, his eyes tracking her every move. "Good work, boy," she murmured, scratching behind his ears, feeling the steady thrum of his pulse. Their bond was wordless, forged in the quiet hours of conditioning, nights running perimeters under floodlights, days passing scents in windswept fields. Rex didn't question, he sensed truth. Back in the main briefing room, Captain Reed reviewed the logs, his finger tracing the screen. Vasquez, a word. The tent flap rustled as she entered, the canvas walls muffling the outside clamor of personnel dispersing. He didn't look up immediately, letting the silence stretch. "That alert," It's the fourth in 2 months. The colonel's asking questions about program efficacy. You know what that means." She stood at parade rest, uniform still dusted with the morning's grit. "Sir, Rex's accuracy rate is 98% field certified. The alerts aren't false. They're prompts for verification." "Verification that disrupts operations," Reed countered, finally meeting her gaze. His voice was low, confidential almost, but edged with authority. "This base runs on precision, not hunches. Corporal Grant's file is solid, vetted by intel. If your dog's picking ghosts, it's a liability." Elena held her ground, the air between them heavy with unspoken stakes. Her own transfer to Fort Harlan had come after a commendation for a K-9 assist in a high-threat extraction, but whispers of over-reliance on the animal had followed. Reed represented the shift, tech-forward, instinct-skeptical. Pushing back meant framing it as duty, not defiance. "With respect, sir, dismissing indications without follow-through risks oversight. I've requested the admin flag on Grant's transfer. If it's clear, fine, but Rex has saved lives by not ignoring the subtle." He leaned back, the chair creaking under his weight. Outside, a Humvee rumbled past, its tires humming on the wet concrete from an earlier washdown. "You're walking a line, Sergeant. Loyalty to your unit is admirable, but blind trust in a dog over command. That's a fast track to reassignment." He paused, then added softer, "I don't want that for you, or the program, but orders are orders." The words hung, a subtle warning wrapped in concern. Elena saluted, exiting the tent into the cooling afternoon breeze. The base stretched out orderly, barracks in neat rows, flags snapping at half-mast for a recent memorial. She headed toward the admin block, mind turning to Grant. Logistics specialist, yes, but his sparse file nagged, minimal field time, overseas rotations unlogged. Rex's alert wasn't random. It was a thread pulling at the seams of security. In the handler's lounge, a small prefab with lockers and a coffee machine humming steadily, Eleanor pulled up non-secure access on her personal device. Grant's public profile, standard army stock, but one photo caught her. A group shot from a supply convoy, his posture slightly off, shoulders hunched as if guarding something. Coincidence? Or the dog's nose for deception? She closed the screen as footsteps approached, another handler nodding in passing. Night fell with military efficiency, lights out at 2200, the base settling into watchful quiet. Elena lay in her bunk, Rex curled at the foot, his breathing a rhythmic anchor. Sleep came fitful, dreams laced with scents, ink, sweat, the faint acrid whiff of forgery. Tomorrow's routine would test the alert's validity, but already the defiance simmered, a quiet challenge to the chain that bound them all. In the rigid world of ranks, one dog's truth could unravel the facade, forcing the institution to confront what lay hidden in its own roster. The base awoke under a slate-grey dawn, the kind that pressed down on Fort Harlan like a held breath, muting the usual clamour of reveller. Elena rose before the bugle, her movements precise in the dim light of the barracks, pulling on her fatigues with the quiet efficiency of habit. Rex stirred at the foot of her bunk, his dark form unfolding with a soft stretch, paws scraping faintly against the linoleum. She clipped his leash, the metal snap echoing in the still air, and they stepped out into the chill, the scent of dew-kissed gravel sharp underfoot. Morning PT loomed, 5 miles with the handler team, but Elena's mind was already turning circuits around Corporal Grant, the roster's shadow lingering like static on a radio. In the admin block, the fluorescent hum greeted her first, followed by the clack of keyboards from the early shift clerks. Sergeant Morales, a stocky veteran with a perpetual coffee stain on his sleeve, looked up from his station. "Vasquez, you're in early. Trouble with the logs." She nodded toward the secure terminal, keeping her voice low. "Need a deeper pull on a personnel file. Grant, Elias, transfer from Bragg." Rex sat at her heel, his ears twitching at the undercurrent of printer ink and stale air. But he remained still, a coiled spring of focus. Morales glanced at the dog, then back to her, his expression neutral. Clearance level? That one's got some seals. He tapped in her credentials, the screen flickering to life with layers of redacted entries. Elena leaned in, scanning the expanded dossier, overseas deployments listed as classified support. But gaps yawned where details should be. No unit patches, no commendations beyond basics. A single line caught her eye: prior contractor affiliation, blacked out. Mercenary work? The army didn't hire guns for hire, but leaks happened, shadows slipping through vetting. Rex shifted, his nose lifting toward the terminal, as if scenting the digital void. Elena placed a hand on his head, feeling the warmth of his fur, the steady rise and fall of his flanks. "Print the unredacted if you can," she said to Morales, "for the alert log." He hesitated, fingers hovering. "Captain Reed's been in here twice this week, sniffing around K9 metrics. You sure about this?" "Protocol," she replied evenly, though the knot in her gut tightened. Denying the pull now would mean betraying the bond that had carried her through dust-choked patrols and midnight alerts. Morales shrugged, cueing the printout, the machine whirring softly in the corner. By 0700, the handler team assembled on the perimeter trail, boots pounding in sync against the packed dirt, the rhythm broken only by labored breaths and the occasional command from the lead instructor. Elena ran with Rex off-leash in the open stretches, his trot matching her stride, tongue lolling in the warming air. The exercise was meant to build endurance, but her thoughts raced ahead. To Grant's sparse file, the odd transfer timestamp, Rex's unerring fixation. If the dog was right, this wasn't a false positive. It was a fracture in the base's armor, a disguised threat embedded in the roster, like a mine in sand. Midway through the run, her earpiece crackled. "Vasquez, report to Ops tent, now!" Captain Reed's voice, clipped and formal, cut through the static. She signaled the team lead, veering off trail with Rex, the dog's pace quickening as if sensing the shift. The tent loomed at the edge of the training grounds, canvas flaps tied back against the breeze, the faint odor of machine oil wafting from nearby vehicles. Inside, Reed stood with Colonel Harlan, the base commander, a silver-haired figure whose presence filled the space like polished brass. Spread on the folding table, the printout from admin, Grant's file open beside a tablet displaying Elena's alert log. The air was thick with tension, the hum of a tactical radio underscoring the silence. "Sergeant," Colonel Harlan began, his tone measured, eyes appraising. "Explain this escalation. Captain Reed informs me your K9 interrupted a standard drill over a personnel list." Elena saluted, standing at attention, Rex settling beside her with a soft huff. "Sir, Rex indicated an anomaly on Corporal Grant's entry, scent-based detection, possible document tampering or unauthorized handling. I've cross-checked. His transfer has irregularities." Reed interjected, his voice edged. "Irregularities that Intel cleared, Colonel. This is the same dog that's flagged clean shipments and empty rooms, unstable asset, wasting resources." The word hit like a boot on gravel, but Eleanor held steady, her gaze forward. Rex's ears flicked at the tone, a low vibration rumbling in his chest, but she quelled it with a subtle touch. "Sir, with respect, Rex's certification includes forensic scent work. Dismissal without verification compromises security." Colonel Harlan studied the papers, his fingers tracing the redacted lines, the tense shadows playing across his weathered face. Outside, the PT group thundered past, distant shouts fading into the wind. "We've had no breaches here, Vasquez. Grant's in logistics. Mundane work, but protocol demands follow-up." He nodded to Reed. "Pull Grant for questioning, quietly, and Sergeant, your dog's on notice. If this is nothing, the program's under review." Reed's jaw tightened, but he acknowledged with a curt nod. "Understood, sir." As the colonel exited, the captain turned to Elena, his expression a mask of controlled frustration. "You pushed this. If it backfires, it's on you. Leash the instincts, or they'll cost us all." She saluted again, exiting into the sunlight that now beat down mercilessly, glinting off the roster board in the distance. Rex trotted close, his nose questing the air, as if already tracing the next thread. By noon, Grant was summoned to the MP office, a squat building near the motor pool, its concrete walls radiating heat. Elena waited outside with Rex, the dog's focus sharpening as the corporal approached. Average build, unremarkable in his utilities, but his stride hitched slightly, eyes darting to the K9 unit. "Handler," Grant said, voice neutral, stopping at a respectful distance. "Heard my name came up, something with the roster?" Elena kept her response professional, leash firm in hand. "Routine verification, Corporal. Rex alerted during a sweep. Standard procedure." His gaze flicked to the dog, a flicker of unease crossing his features, subtle. But Rex caught it, hackles rising fractionally, a soft growl building. The MPs emerged then, escorting him inside for the interview, the door clicking shut behind them. Eleanor paced the shaded walkway, the scent of cooling engine blocks mixing with Rex's damp fur from the morning run. Inside, questions flew. Transfer details, contractor history, the late-night login. Grant's answers were smooth, but the tablet's audit trail, pulled by Intel, revealed pings to off-base servers, faint digital footprints of external comms. Word spread through the base like radio chatter, whispers in the mess hall, sidelong glances during afternoon briefings. By evening, as the sun dipped low and cast the parade ground in amber, the public reckoning began. A hastily called assembly in the main hall, ranks filed in under the colonel's order, the air humming with speculation. Elena and Rex stood at the flank, the dog's presence a silent testament amid the sea of uniforms. Colonel Harlan took the podium. Microphone feedback sharp before his voice steadied. "Personnel, an internal security review is underway regarding a potential irregularity in assignments. No cause for alarm, but vigilance is our duty." Eyes turned to Grant, seated in the front row, his posture rigid. Then to Elena, the handler whose defiance had sparked it, a ripple now cresting into view. Private Lawson leaned toward a squadmate, murmuring low, but the colonel's gaze silenced them. Rex sat unmoving, his bond with Eleanor a quiet anchor in the scrutiny. The assembly ended with a salute, boots echoing as they dispersed, but the fracture was visible now, the chain of command bending under the weight of one dog's truth. In the rigid lines of military life, integrity demanded exposure, and the base held its collective breath for what the investigation would unearth. Comment where you're watching from. I want to know how far stories of courage and integrity can reach. The investigation unfolded with the quiet precision of a night patrol, shadows lengthening across Fort Harlan as the assembly dispersed into the evening haze. Eleanor led Rex back to the handler barracks, the gravel crunching under their boots, the dog's leash a steady line between them. The air carried the faint tang of diesel from the motor pool, mingling with the earthy scent of Rex's fur, still warm from the day's exertions. Overhead, floodlights hummed to life, casting stark pools of yellow across the orderly rows of buildings, while distant voices from the mess hall filtered through. Low murmurs dissecting the colonel's words, the roster irregularity now a whispered spectre among the ranks. In the dim glow of her quarters, Eleanor secured Rex in his padded crate, his eyes following her with that unwavering trust as she latched the door. She changed into off-duty fatigues, the fabric cool against her skin, then pulled her secure tablet from the locker. The base network was abuzz with restricted access pings. Intel teams cross-referencing Grant's biometrics against global watch lists, a procedural cascade triggered by the alert log. Her own entry had flagged it all, one handler's insistence turning a routine sweep into a full-spectrum review. A knock at the door, sharp, authoritative. Sergeant Morales from admin, his face etched with fatigue under the hallway light. "Vasquez, Colonel wants you in the ops center. Bring the dog." He glanced at Rex's crate, where the Malinois lay alert, ears perked. "And whatever notes you have on the alert." She nodded, clipping the leash and falling into step beside him. The walk to the ops center cut through the heart of the base, past sentries at checkpoints who saluted crisply, their eyes lingering on Rex with a mix of curiosity and caution. The building loomed squat and reinforced, its concrete facade absorbing the night's chill. Inside, the air was cooler, laced with the ozone hum of servers and the faint coffee bitterness from a pot left brewing too long. Colonel Harlan stood at the central console, flanked by Captain Reed and two intel officers in crisp BDUs, their tablets synced to a large overhead screen displaying Grant's file in fragmented layers. Grant himself sat in a side chair, hands folded on his lap, expression impassive under the harsh fluorescence. Rex entered first, his nails clicking softly on the tile, and immediately tensed, a low rumble building in his throat as he fixed on the corporal. Elena quelled it with a firm "Sit," guiding him to heel beside her. "Sergeant," Harlan said, his voice steady, gesturing to a spot near the console. "Your alert prompted this. Walk us through it again." Elena stood at parade rest, recounting the drill, the sweep, Rex's halt at the roster, the growl and pawing at Grant's name. She kept it factual, procedural, no embellishments, just the sequence of commands and responses. "His indication was specific, sir, not a general alert. Scent lock on the entry point." Reed shifted, arms crossed. "We've run prelim scans. No explosives, no contraband. Grant's prints match his file. This could be scent bleed from the laminate, ink, adhesive. Your dog's nose isn't infallible." Rex's ears flicked at the captain's tone, but Elena held her ground, her voice even. "Certified for 95% accuracy on document forensics, sir, including human trace elements, if there's been handling outside protocol." One of the intel officers, a lieutenant with wire-rimmed glasses, interjected softly, "We've pulled server logs. Grant accessed the roster update terminal at 0230 on transfer night, alone, and there's a metadata anomaly, IP trace bouncing off a civilian proxy before routing through Bragg." Grant leaned forward slightly, his posture still composed. "Sir, that was a secure line glitch. I reported it to IT. Logistics requires off-hours syncs for supply manifests." Harlan's eyes narrowed, studying the man. The room fell quiet, save for the soft whir of the air system and Rex's steady breathing. Elena felt the weight of the moment, the chain of command teetering on verification, her loyalty to Rex pulling against the urge to defer. Dismissing the dog now would close the file, preserve order, but at the cost of potential oversight. Trusting it meant escalating, risking the label of instigator in a system that prized uniformity. "Run the proxy trace," Harlan ordered the lieutenant, "and Vasquez, your K9. Can he confirm on Grant directly?" She hesitated a fraction, then nodded. "Yes, sir. Proximity indication." With permission, she released a short lead, commanding Rex forward. The dog approached Grant methodically, nostrils flaring, circling once. The corporal held still, but a muscle twitched in his jaw, his scent shifting, sweat under cologne, the acrid edge of nerves. Rex paused at his boots, inhaling deeply, then sat abruptly, barking once. Affirmative alert. Grant's composure cracked, eyes darting to the colonel. "This is ridiculous. I'm no threat. Check my clearances." "We are," Harlan replied, his tone unyielding. "Escort him to holding, Captain. Full biometrics and poly." Reed moved to comply, but as MPs entered, Grant surged up, shoving a chair aside. "You think a dog knows better than intel? This is harassment." His voice rose, echoing off the walls, drawing stares from the outer staff. The scuffle was brief, restrained without force, cuffs clicking as he was led out. But the outburst shattered the room's restraint, witnesses now numbering a dozen. Elena knelt to Rex, murmuring praise, her hand steady on his harness as adrenaline ebbed. The dog's tail thumped once, loyalty affirmed in the quiet aftermath. Harlan turned to her, expression appraising. "That confirmation holds weight, Sergeant, but if it unravels clean, the scrutiny falls back on the program." "Understood, sir," she said, rising. The ops center buzzed anew, analysts diving into traces, the screen flickering with encrypted data streams. Outside, the night deepened, stars pricking the sky above the perimeter lights. Word of the confrontation leaked like radio static, through the MP channels, into the barracks, turning private doubt into base-wide vigilance. By SO 400, Elena returned to quarters, Rex settling at her side on the bunk, his warmth a counter to the chill seeping through the walls. Sleep evaded her, mind replaying the bark, the shove, the colonel's measured gaze. Grant's proxy hit had led to a shadow account, linked to overseas contractors, mercenary firms with blurred lines to sanctioned ops. Not a full breach yet, but infiltration. A logistics role masking data siphons, subtle sabotage from within. Dawn broke with urgent reveille, the base stirring under heightened alert. Patrols doubled, checkpoints reinforced, the roster pulled for manual audits. In the handler briefing, Elena faced sidelong looks from fellow operators, respect mingled with wariness, her defiance now a visible fault line. Captain Reed pulled her aside post-brief, his voice low amid the shuffle of gear. "You lit the fuse, Vasquez. If Grant's dirty, you're vindicated. If not, the colonel's reviewing K9 integration. All of it." She met his eyes, uniform crisp despite the fatigue. "Sir, integrity demands the check. Rex doesn't lie." He nodded curtly, turning away as the team dispersed. The morning's perimeter run felt heavier, Rex's trot purposeful beside her, the desert wind carrying whispers of change. By midday, intel confirmed it. Grant's true alias tied to a private security firm, embedded to exfiltrate supply routes for rival actors. The mercenary disguise cracked, exposed by a dog's unerring nose. The revelation rippled upward, prompting a command-wide memo, enhanced vetting protocols, K9 roles reaffirmed in security doctrine. Elena stood watch during the extraction, Rex at heel as MPs secured the perimeter, Grant loaded into an unmarked transport under grey skies. No drama, just procedure, the institution correcting its course, one alert at a time. In the quiet that followed, Elena scratched Rex's ears, the bond between them a silent victory amid the ranks. Loyalty had tested the system, and in its rigid embrace, conscience prevailed, not with fanfare, but with the steady march of reform. The afternoon sun slanted through the narrow windows of the tribunal room, a converted briefing hall in the base's administrative wing, casting elongated shadows across the polished oak table. Elena stood at ease in the back row, her uniform pressed to regulation creases. Rex seated precisely at her left boot, his harness gleaming under the recessed lights. The air held the faint, sterile scent of waxed floors and fresh printer paper, undercut by the sharper tang of coffee from thermoses lining the sideboard. Outside, the muffled thump of a distant rotor wash reminded everyone of the base's ceaseless rhythm, even as this room suspended it for judgment. Colonel Harlan presided from the head, his silver cufflinks catching the light as he reviewed the stacked dossiers before him. Flanking him were Captain Reed, his posture rigid with barely contained tension, and Major Ellis, the JAG officer detached from Division HQ, her notebook open to a page of neat annotations. Corporal Grant, or whatever alias clung to him now, sat cuffed at the far end, flanked by two MPs whose boots planted firmly on the tile, a silent wall of protocol. The tribunal wasn't a court-martial yet, just a preliminary board to assess the breach. But its gravity pressed down like the humid air before a desert storm. "Sergeant Vasquez," Harlan began, his voice carrying the measured cadence of command briefings, "your testimony first. The alert sequence, step by step." Elena stepped forward, saluting before taking the witness chair, Rex following to sit at her side, his eyes scanning the room with quiet vigilance. She recounted it again, the drill's progression, Rex's halt at the roster, the growl that halted the platoon. Her words were clipped, factual, timestamps from her tablet, the scent profile Rex had locked onto, the secondary confirmation in ops. No embellishment, just the procedural chain that had led from paper to proxy traces to the mercenary link unearthed in Grant's offshore accounts. As she spoke, Grant's gaze bored into her, not defiant but calculating, his fingers drumming softly on the table's edge until an MP stilled them. Reed shifted in his seat, the chair creaking faintly, his earlier skepticism now a visible fracture in his composure. The captain had ordered the initial stand down, after all. If the board pinned negligence, it rippled to him. Major Ellis leaned forward, her pen pausing, and the dog's indication on the subject directly described the behavioral cues. "Proximity alert, ma'am," Elena replied evenly. "Nasal flare, targeted sit, single bark, matches training protocols for human trace anomalies, stress pheromones, foreign residues." Rex differentiated it from baseline sense in the room. Harlan nodded, flipping to an exhibit, the intel report stamped and sealed, detailing Grant's ties to a private military contractor operating in gray zones, supply route leaks funneled to non-state actors, disguised as routine logistics oversight. The board had witnesses queued, the IT specialist who'd flagged the proxy, Morales from admin on the late-night access, even Private Lawson, who'd seen the initial roster pause. Grant's turn came next, his voice steady as he leaned into the microphone. "Sirs, ma'am, this is a misunderstanding. My contractor days were legit. Pre-army, the transfer glitch, system error reported." He glanced at Elena, his tone sharpening fractionally. "But pinning it on a dog, that's not justice. Handlers know sense bleed, ink, sweat from clerks. This program's unreliable, as Captain Reed noted." Reed cleared his throat, interjecting. "The captain's assessment was operational, Corporal, but evidence stands." His words carried a subtle pivot, loyalty to chain yielding to the dossier's weight. The room held its breath, the only sound the soft scratch of Ellis's pen. Testimony stretched into the late afternoon, the sun dipping to gild the windows in orange. Lawson described the platoon's freeze, the murmurs that followed. Morales confirmed the unlogged access patterns. Each account layered the moral breach. Not just infiltration, but the command's initial dismissal, a hesitation that could have cost operational integrity. Elena felt the eyes on her, appraising, some grateful, others wary. Her defiance had exposed it, but in the tribunal's glare, it tested her too. Was Rex's truth an asset or the spark that upended routines? Harlan called a recess at 1600, the board retreating to deliberate in the adjacent chamber. Elena led Rex outside to the shaded courtyard, the dog's paws padding softly on the concrete path, now cooling under the fading light. She filled his water bowl from a spigot, the stream glugging steadily as he lapped, his tail flicking in quiet contentment. The bass hummed around them, trucks rumbling toward the motor pool, a handler team jogging past with their own K9s. Leashes taut in unison, whispers reached her ears. Vasquez called it, from a passing sergeant, a low, unstable my ass, from another. Captain Reed approached then, his steps measured, hands clasped behind his back. "Sergeant!" He stopped at a respectful distance, gaze on Rex rather than her. The board's leaning toward charges. Espionage adjunct, at minimum. Your log initiated it. She straightened, wiping her hands on her trousers. "Sir, protocol demanded follow-through." He met her eyes, the lines around his softening imperceptibly. I called him unstable. That was premature. The Colonel's eyeing reforms. Mandatory K9 cross-checks on personnel docks. A pause, the wind rustling overhead leaves. You walked the line. Respect for that. The admission hung, a bridge over the earlier rift born of shared duty. Elena nodded, the weight lifting fractionally from her shoulders. Rex pressed against her leg, sensing the shift, his warmth a reminder of the bond that had carried them here. The session reconvened at dusk, floodlights buzzing to life outside as the board returned. Harlan's voice filled the room. Preliminary findings confirm irregularity. Corporal Grant, you're remanded for full investigation. Base security protocols updated pending JAG review. And no dramatics, just the steady grind of justice, orders cascading like a well-executed maneuver. Grant was escorted out, his head high but steps measured, the MP's grips firm. The tribunal adjourned with salutes, the room emptying in orderly fashion, echoes fading down the hall. Elena and Rex exited last, the night air crisp now, carrying the distant bark of another K9 on patrol. In the handler barracks, she logged the day's events, her fingers steady on the keys, Rex curling at her feet with a contented sigh. Word of the board spread through evening chow, quiet nods in the mess line, a junior handler clapping her shoulder with a murmured solid work. The defiance that began with a growl had crested into reckoning, the institution's machinery turning toward accountability. Captain Reed's doubt had cracked, replaced by a tentative alliance, and Elena felt the ripple. Her career intact, Rex's role elevated, a quiet reform seeding the ranks. Yet the cost lingered in the silence, nights of scrutiny ahead, the moral weight of upending a peer's life, even if justified. As she dimmed the lights, Rex's breathing evened into sleep. Elena stared at the ceiling, the base's hum a lullaby of consequence. Integrity demanded exposure, but in its wake came the harder work, rebuilding trust, one verified roster at a time. The chain of command bent, but it held, stronger for the test. The days following the tribunal settled over Fort Harlan like a dust storm's aftermath. Clearer skies, but with grit lingering in every corner of routine. Elena moved through the base with measured steps, her boots leaving faint imprints on the dew-slicked paths at dawn. Rex trotting at her heel with the same unyielding focus that had unraveled the mercenaries' guise. The air carried the crisp bite of early morning, mingled with the metallic scent of dew on chain-link fences and the distant rumble of generators powering the perimeter lights. Whispers had evolved into formal briefings. Grant's full extraction confirmed by JAG. His alias tied to a network siphoning intel for off-book operations. No explosions, no chases, just the quiet extraction of a threat embedded like a faulty round in a magazine. In the handler's briefing room, a prefab hut lined with tactical charts and scent training aids, Elena stood before a small assembly of K9 operators and junior officers. Colonel Harlan had mandated the session, part of the reform wave rippling from her alert. Enhanced integration protocols, mandating K9 cross-checks on all personnel documentation. The room hummed with the low whir of a projector, casting blue light across faces etched with fatigue and quiet respect. Rex sat at her side, his harness adjusted for the indoor setting, ears perked toward the group as if passing their sense for intent. Sergeant Vasquez will lead on forensic scent applications, the lead instructor announced, his voice echoing slightly off the cinderblock walls. Elena nodded, stepping to the front, her tablet synced to the screen displaying anonymized case files, Rex's alerts mapped against verification outcomes. She kept her delivery crisp, procedural. K9 detection isn't intuition, it's calibrated response. In the roster incident, Rex isolated trace elements, adhesives inconsistent with standard issue, layered with human pheromones indicating stress handling. Protocol now requires secondary logs for any indication, escalating to intel within 24 hours. A young handler, Corporal Diaz, raised a hand from the back row, his uniform still creased from PT. "Ma'am, how do we balance that with ops tempo?" Captain Reed pushed back hard on disruptions. Eleanor met his gaze evenly, the room's fluorescent hum underscoring the pause. "We document the pushback as part of the log. Chain of command adapts. Dismissing alerts risks breaches, as we saw. Rex's 98% hit rate isn't anecdotal, it's field verified." Rex shifted slightly, his tail thumping once against the tile. A subtle affirmation that drew faint smiles from the group. The session stretched into the morning, hands-on demos with sample documents treated to mimic forgeries, the air filling with the faint, acrid whiff of chemical simulants. By its end, notebooks were filled, and the operators dispersed with a new rhythm in their steps. Doubt yielding to protocol, Elena's stand ceding quiet mentorship. Captain Reed caught her outside the hut, the sun climbing to warm the gravel underfoot. His approach was deliberate, fatigues tucked with precision, the lines of his face softened by the light filtering through overhead camouflage netting. "Vasquez, solid brief. The Colonel's incorporating it into the next quarterly review." She saluted, Rex holding steady at heel. "Thank you, sir. Just protocol refined." He nodded, glancing at the dog with an appraising eye, no longer the skeptical glare of weeks prior, but a measured acknowledgement. "I called him unstable. That was my error. Over-reliance on tech metrics, underestimating the bond." His voice lowered, confidential, amid the passing Humvee's low growl. "Grant's network? It traced back to 3 other bases. Your alert saved more than Harlan. JAG's recommending K9 expansions across division." The admission landed like a well-placed round, precise and resonant. Elena felt the shift in the air between them, the rigid hierarchy bending toward collaboration. "Sir, Rex's training emphasizes partnership, handlers and units together. That's the strength." Reed's hand extended briefly, a rare informal gesture before he clasped it behind his back. "Agreed. You're briefing the Colonel on expansions next week. Take point." He turned toward Ops, boots crunching away, leaving Eleanor with the faint scent of his aftershave trailing on the breeze. Afternoon brought perimeter duties, Elena and Rex sweeping the outer fence line under a sky streaked with high clouds. The chain link rattled softly in the wind, desert scrub whispering against it, while radio chatter crackled in her earpiece. Routine checks, no anomalies. Rex's nose quested low, cataloguing the earth, diesel from patrols, faint urine marks from wildlife. But his gait was lighter, the weight of scrutiny lifted. They paused at the roster board's distant view, now under 24-hour surveillance cams, a laminated replacement gleaming fresh. Elena knelt, running a gloved hand over Rex's flank, feeling the steady thrum of his ribs. "You did it, boy," she murmured, the words lost to the wind, but felt in his lean against her. Back at barracks by dusk, the handler lounge buzzed with off-duty chatter, coffee steaming in mugs, the clink of dog tags on lockers. Private Lawson approached, a stack of training manuals under his arm. "Sergeant, mind if I shadow your next drill? Learning the cues, could use it for my team." She poured a cup, the machine gurgling, and nodded. "Gear up at 0600. Rex sets the pace." The exchange marked the legacy's quiet spread. Not heroics, but replication, integrity modeled in daily routines, rippling through ranks like orders down a platoon. Night fell with the base's disciplined hush, lights dimming in waves across the compound. Elena lay in her bunk, Rex curled at the foot, his breathing a rhythmic anchor against the faint hum of the AC unit. Dreams came in fragments, scents unraveling shadows, salutes held firm. The defiance that began with a growl had transformed the system, not shattered it, but reinforced. With K9 units woven deeper into vetting protocols, budgets reallocated from drones to handlers. Her file noted the commendation, "exemplary moral initiative," a line that would echo in evaluations, mentoring the next generation. Yet vulnerability lingered in the silence, the cost of standing against doubt, the tremor in a hand over a leash when orders clashed with conscience. Elena scratched Rex's ears absently, his eyes opening to meet hers in the dark, loyalty unspoken but absolute. In the rigid world of Fort Harlan, one bond had tested the chains, emerging stronger, a legacy of trust, where duty and morality aligned under the same banner. The base slept on, vigilant, its order renewed by the quiet courage of those who dared to verify. The weeks after the tribunal etched a new cadence into Fort Harlan's routines, the base's machinery humming with subtle recalibrations that echoed Elena's quiet stand. Dawn patrols now included dual sweeps, human eyes paired with canine noses questing over freshly audited rosters and access logs, the air crisp with the scent of dew on printed sheets and the faint rubber of boot treads on expanded checkpoints. Elena moved through it all with the steady gait of a handler attuned to change, Rex at her flank, his harness creaking softly as they led the morning formation along the perimeter fence. The wind carried the low whine of idling engines from the motor pool, mingling with the disciplined shuffle of boots, a rhythm that now incorporated canine commands broadcast over squad radios. Such, forward, halt, and verify. In the expanded canine training annex, a newly funded structure of reinforced concrete rising on the edge of the drill grounds, Eleanor stood before a mixed group of handlers, infantry scouts, and even a few intel analysts. The room's walls were lined with scent chambers, sealed units humming with filtered air, loaded with simulants mimicking forged inks and stress-laden fabrics. Overhead, vents whispered cool drafts, cutting the midday heat that seeped through the narrow windows. Colonel Harlan had elevated her role, tasking her with developing the integration curriculum, a direct outgrowth of the Grant breach. Her voice carried clear and even, projecting slides of procedural flowcharts onto the screen. Verification isn't optional, it's layered. Initial alert logs to command within 60 seconds, followed by cross-sent confirmation. Rex's case proved it. Anomalies in human trace can precede digital flags. Corporal Diaz, now her shadow on rotations, nodded from the front row, his notebook open to sketches of alert patterns. "Ma'am, how do we train for pushback, like with Captain Reed's initial call?" Elena paused, the projector fan whirring softly in the quiet. Rex sat alert beside the podium, his black eyes scanning the group, nostrils flaring at the layered odors of sweat and graphite from pencils. "Document it. Chain of command thrives on evidence, not assumption. My log on Grant escalated because it was factual. Timestamps, behavioral cues. Doubt tests us, but protocol holds." The analysts murmured agreement, one tapping notes into a tablet, the click of keys underscoring the shift. Tech no longer sidelining instinct, but amplifying it. By afternoon, the session broke into practicals, the annex filling with the sharp barks of working dogs and the rustle of leashes uncoiling. Elena paired Diaz with a young shepherd, guiding the scout through a mock roster check. Laminated sheets treated with trace compounds, hidden among authentic files. Rex demonstrated first, his paws silent on the matted floor as he zeroed in, sitting precise before the anomaly. Diaz's dog followed, hesitant at first, then firm, earning a crisp good hold from Elena. The air thickened with the earthy scent of wet fur from water breaks, dogs lapping from stainless bowls while handlers exchanged low debriefs. In these moments, the legacy took root. Not in speeches, but in replicated trust, Elena's defiance mentoring a dozen bonds like hers. Captain Reed observed from the doorway, his frame silhouetted against the glaring sun, arms crossed in a posture that spoke more of integration than oversight. He waited until the group dispersed, boots echoing down the hall before approaching. "Sergeant, the Colonel's review board just greenlit your expansions. K9 units embedded in all vetting cycles, division-wide." His tone held no edge now, just the clipped efficiency of a commander adapting. The faint scent of gun oil clung to his uniform from an earlier range session, a reminder of shared ground. She straightened from securing Rex's lead, meeting his gaze level. "Sir, Rex's work made it possible." He glanced at the Malinois, who regarded him steadily, tail flicking once in neutral acknowledgement. "I undervalued that." "Called him unstable. My words, not the facts. The breach report cites your protocol as the pivot. Saved ops across 3 posts." Reed's hand rose briefly as if to salute, but settled on his sidearm holster instead, a subtle gesture of respect. "Your point on the rollout, Harlan's symbol for it. Moral initiative in the ranks." The words settled like a confirmed radio check, affirming the redemption that had quietly unfolded. Elena saluted, the motion crisp as Reed exited into the heat, his steps purposeful toward the ops tent. Outside, the base stretched in orderly expanse, barracks flags snapping in the breeze, a convoy rumbling past with the low growl of tires on asphalt. Elena led Rex to the shaded run area, a fenced enclosure dotted with agility ramps and chew posts, the ground soft with packed sand. She unclipped his leash, watching him bound forward, circling back to her with a playful nudge, his wet nose pressing against her gloved hand. The bond remained the core, unyielding amid the reforms, loyalty that had tested the system and emerged as its strength. Evening briefings in the main hall now wove her story into doctrine, anonymized but unmistakable, a case study projected on screens for incoming platoons, detailing the roster alerts cascade to institutional safeguards. Whispers in the mess hall had solidified into nods of camaraderie, junior handlers seeking her out for off-hours drills, their dogs mirroring Rex's precision under floodlit skies. The cost of integrity lingered in quieter ways. Elena's sleep still fractured by echoes of the tribunal, the weight of upended lives balanced against prevented threats. But vulnerability yielded to purpose, her file's commendation a quiet emblem. Exemplary conscience under command. As night cloaked the base, Elena walked the final perimeter check. Rex's silhouette sharp against the perimeter lights, their shadows merging on the gravel path. The hum of helicopters faded into the distance, leaving the steady pulse of generators and the soft pad of paws. In this rigid world of orders and oversight, one handler's trust in her partner had sparked a transformation, the chain of command, once brittle with doubt, now fortified by verified truth. Elena became the symbol, not of rebellion, but of disciplined courage, her legacy rippling through protocols and partnerships, reminding every rank that morality and duty could align, nose to the ground, one alert at a time. Subscribe for more stories of loyalty, courage, and justice within the ranks. Thank you for watching the case of a commander called her K9 unstable, until he identified a disguised mercenary on the base roster. See you in the next one. In the end, it was the silence between commands that forged the unbreakable. A handler's steady hand, a dog's unerring nose, and a system's quiet evolution toward light.